This is take 3. Welcome to the Mildly Morose Takeover, a bonus episode for the Victor Death podcast, where my co-host Dan and myself sit down and create the content that he's going to be putting onto his channel, The Mildly Morose Man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Eli. We're going to be
thanks for being here.
talking about Beyond Good and Evil 2, and we'll have like just the full-length conversation here on Victory or Death, but sort of like a highlight reel kind of conversation with a little bit of my own video editing will be over on my own channel. So it is great to be here and great to be talking with you about Beyond Good and Evil 2.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to get started, Eli, who are you? Well, and more specifically, what has your education been?
Mm-hmm.
What's your background like? And what are some of your other interests? And for my audience, tell me about what you're doing with some of your creative ventures.
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's degree in English communications, which is basically fancy speak for journalism. With like a very literary heavy journalism. My literary focus was Gothic horror, so I have a soft spot for guys like H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe, Gothic literature, so anything like light horror, sci-fi, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so got a bachelor's degree in that, and then I also have a minor in design. So I spend my time kind of balancing copywriting and design for my professional skills. And I do podcasting on the side. We went to college together, and that's kind of how we got into this whole mess.
Yeah. It's a great mess. Yeah. It's a great mess. And so I've joined you on some of your shows as a pretty regular co-host where we talk about content creation and what it's like to be a content creator.
Right.
And the links in the description below for all sorts of things. Hopefully your podcast, also your YouTube channel.
Yep.
It will all be down there if you're interested, especially if you're a content creator just getting started. We try to just be honest about our experiences and what we are trying to accomplish. And so there's something of value there for you to check out.
Yeah, yes. For sure. I think with two real quick, for me, the documentation process that we're kind of doing comes from my more freelance work and also my other podcast called Interview, NTRVW, where I actually talk to other artists, designers, writers, musicians, other, content creators, whether or not they're like social media people or whatever. So that's kind of where I'm bringing my context from. But now that we're starting to do stuff like this, we're going to start collaborating on, YouTube videos, and me potentially even making my own YouTube videos that would fit more in line with your channel. I will start to be able to speak from my end of things as moving from podcasts to actually like video editing and things like that. So really excited to start that process. I know it's going to kick my behind 10 different ways, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be great. It's exciting. It's exciting. We have got games that we're looking at in the works. I think a bunch of great ones, probably some that you've heard before, and maybe some that you guys haven't heard of before. So it will all be great. And Eli, just to hit folks in the feels, who taught you how to love video games?
So I grew up in a very unique living situation. If anyone is out there who knows of a place called Mooseheart, I grew up there with my parents being house parents, family teachers is what they called them there. So my parents were taking care of 10 at-risk youth, including myself and my little sister. And all of them were like actual 90s kids. So I have this weird experience where like they were all born in the late 80s, very early 90s, or actually late 80s for most of them. And so I grew up with like people who were 90s kids. So I kind of have this weird 90s kid nostalgia that I shouldn't have, being born in 95.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah.
One of my first experiences with video games was one of the kids that I grew up with they had an electronics cabinet in the kitchen at the first house we lived in, and they'd have to request to get their electronics out. So they all had like Game Boys and Game Boy Colors. And I remember that someone had a Pokemon Red version. And another
Oh,
person had Super Mario Land or Super Wario World, whichever one was on the Game
okay.
Boy. And yeah, it was totally, that was like my first foray. One of my most vivid memories was actually one of the boys got a PlayStation for Christmas, and they were playing Oddworld. And I was just fascinated with the
Oh,
original Oddworld because it looked brutal
interesting.
and it was weird, and it kind of had that like steampunk gothic vibe to it that I guess stuck with me into my studies. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. And so Eli, you are a gamer,
Yep.
you're a writer, and
Hmm.
you're interested in design.
Yep.
And with the news that just recently came out around BG&E 2 about just how they've used this program called ZBrush
Hmm.
to help create some of the assets in the new game, but most recently used in the trailers that they've been creating for the video game. It'll be great to get your perspective on what we've seen. And that video is like it's like an hour and 30 minutes long.
It's long.
So we're just going to try to discuss some of the highlights. If you do want to see the whole thing, I'll link it in the description below, of course, like always. But what is ZBrush, this tool that they're using to create the 3D assets?
Yeah. If anyone has ever dabbled in character design in 3D, you'll know that there's like Maya and some other 3D character creating tools or like stuff where you can build 3D environments. ZBrush is basically taking uh, the artistic, uh, taking sculpting and bringing it to the 3D space. So the way that you work in ZBrush is like taking, a big ball of clay and using digital tools to mold it and shape it. It ends up being much faster for a lot of people. It ends up being allows more detailing. It doesn't feel as unnatural when you're looking at the 3D characters because you can really get in there and do all of that really fine tuning that you wouldn't do with an actual block of clay.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's a really powerful application that they're using. And if you just want a simple summary of what was there in that hour and 30-minute long video, Denise Takes has a wonderful video on it, and maybe it will be up in the corner there in the eye. I'll put it there. You can check it out there. Um, but there were certain techniques that they were using for the trailer to just create the detail, to create the backdrops. There were certain layering effects that they were using. I mean, just so much went into these trailers. It was a massive production.
Mhm.
What were some of the things that stood out to you, Eli, as you watched some of the trailer sort of behind the scenes footage?
Yeah, so one of the things that really stuck out to me that I found fascinating is they had at the beginning of the video they had run the full trailer, which we've all seen for the most part. If you haven't, check it out. It's really really cool. You get a two legacy characters, Paige and Jade. Everyone else is new, but you really get to see what they're working with in terms of how they've updated the
Hmm.
visuals of Beyond Good and Evil. Anyway, so they showed the trailer all the way through at the beginning, and then later, after they kind of talked about ZBrush, they showed the trailer by running different scenes, kind of over and over again, like really short clips, like GIF length clips, where they would stack all of the different effects. And I
Hmm.
thought what was really cool was that um, when they said that the trailer was technically a running game, I didn't realize that what went into a game is that you still have all of these effects layered on each other, not just like the model, but the built-in shadow, the lighting, the particle effects, all of that. And so like they showed the scene where it was just the silhouette of the like a ship flying through, and then showed it with just the smoke of space, and then like showed all the other particle effects, and then layered it all back together. And I did not realize just how complicated that process was. And as someone who's like dabbled in photo manipulation and illustration, and other design stuff, it boggles my mind how much work goes into even just crafting like a 3-second scene. It's nuts.
Yeah, so much time to create all those assets, get the effects right. I mean, it's just brilliant. There's a scene where a character called Uma is working on a patient because they are like intoxicated to just terrible levels, partially because of how Paige cooks with way too much alcohol. But so she's working on this patient, and the room that she's in is kind of dark in the
Mhm.
trailer, but they layer things in, like you were saying, and you can see how much detail is just like finely placed in some of the shadows.
Yeah,
But
crazy.
and they just fill out the room before they add lighting and effects. But I mean, there's just so much detail in all of those spaces,
Yeah,
and so much care goes into crafting those trailers. It's wild.
so wild.
Yeah, yeah. And you brought up that there are two legacy characters that show
Mhm.
up in this most recent trailer, and that's Paige and Jade. And they talk a little bit about the design philosophy behind those characters. What are some of the things that stuck out to you about Paige's design?
Yeah.
And then some of the, he has a history of being in the original game, also in a trailer of the game that got canceled, and now finally in what is now the prequel to the original game.
Yeah, so the thing that's really interesting about looking at the original BGenie and looking at the version now is that they've clearly got the technology to really like live into the vision of, the creator of BGenie. Um, and so part of what you're going to see is that the characters retain their mannerisms and even some of their voice inflections, like their vocal characteristics, especially with Paige. But the underlying structure of those characters are dramatically different. When it comes to drawing and even sculpting, you usually have some sort of base shape that you're using to kind of build your skeleton around, or it becomes the skeleton of the rest of your sculpture. And so the original Page was utilizing all circles for the polygons
Hmm.
that he was built on, which gave him a very soft and cartoony look. And they tried rendering him that same way, and he just looked too cartoony. So what they ended up doing is taking him from more square, which made him look too angry, too tough, and moving him over to a diamond so that he had some shapes that are kind of pointing out, which simulate something a little bit happier, kind of hinting towards a smile in his face, and then giving that diamond point at the bottom to elongate his face. So you get to build around all of those different angles, and it creates a much more complex face while retaining some of the um, softness that comes with him being based off circles, because they can build skin around those points. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
what's so interesting is even with all of those changes, I mean, when I saw him in the trailer, and I think when most people saw him, it was like, yeah, that's Paige. You
yeah.
can tell it's Paige, even though they've taken a different approach to his character design. They still were able to keep his basic DNA
Yeah.
sort of in place.
Yeah. They wanted to stray away from having him look like a monster, which was part of what was weird about bringing the circles into the sculpting, is that he looked
Mhm.
too much like a monster, unless like a actual human animal hybrid.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I'm impressed with how much they just really hit the nail on the head for Paige. And I think you're right. It has to do with the way that he retains a smile,
Mhm.
almost just normally. What is that? An RBF. Paige has basically the opposite of
Yeah,
an RBF.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if I can say that on YouTube, but
No,
uh,
you're fine.
he's he's a smiling character with
Yeah,
tusks coming out of his mouth, and even the way his eyebrows are shaped,
yeah.
but his voice is just spot on. I don't know if they have the same voice actor for
I don't
Paige. I
think they
have no idea.
did. He sounded very reminiscent of like a unmasked Happy Roadhog from Overwatch, if you've ever heard him.
Oh no,
He's
no,
got that baritone, but he doesn't have that like sinister cackle to him, you know. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so
But they did a fine job, and it's an interesting position that they're in because they're making a game. I mean, so far after the original,
mhm.
with a more mature feel
Yep,
overall, but yet it's a prequel.
yeah,
And so, Paige, Jade, they need to look younger, even if they are maturing the art style.
right.
For narrative reasons, they need to look younger. So, um, but I think they're doing a fine job sticking and staying true to the legacy of what Beyond Good and Evil is, and the art style that originated with that original game.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So was there anything that you noticed about Jade's character and her character design?
Yeah, I at first I didn't catch it because of the way that the lighting is and the scene where she shows up at the very end of the trailer.
Yeah, and it's only like seconds where we
Yeah,
see
like
her.
seconds. Like you catch her hair and
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
hint of her clothing. You're like, oh, and then Paige is like Jade.
Yep.
So you're like, oh yes, of course that's Jade. But uh, one of the guys on the panel was talking about how the way that he made Jade look younger and still kind of have that mature, sinister look was that he made her eyes bigger. Which, if like you've seen anime, a lot of people think that it's just a stylistic choice, but it's to really emphasize that people look younger. So they give the characters bigger, more expressive eyes. And so even though Jade in this trailer is implied to be not good, she has bigger eyes so that she's more expressive. You can see the depth of her emotions so that she's still relatable, which I thought was really interesting.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be using these 3D assets in the game.
Hmm.
I think so. I mean,
Yeah, of
they'll be less detailed, I think.
course.
The quality will be scaled back a little bit, but I think these are the 3D
Yeah.
assets that are going to be in game.
Because they were talking about how they were making them in house at at the Ubisoft studio, and then they were sending them to the people who cut the trailer together. So yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
That's right. Oh, the trailer was actually made outside of Ubisoft Studios.
yep, yep. They partnered with
Oh,
another
okay.
studio who,
Yep. I forgot. Yep.
cut it all together. But they sculpted all of the characters, sent them the T frames with all of the joints and everything built in, and then they
Mm-hmm.
put the trailer together. So.
Right. I want. Okay. Speculation. Do you think we're gonna see that quality of cutscenes within the game?
I think that the big game companies, especially, I mean, we're talking specifically about Xbox, like Microsoft and Sony, they tend to like to really overhype and toot their own horns, and like 8K has been thrown out there as like a resolution that they could output to. And
Yeah.
I think with what's really going to come down to it is if using ZBrush and using some other programs, they're talking about a meshing program that they're using to like create the
Oh,
textures.
right. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
they can simplify the texturing process while still looking as detailed as it does, um, I don't see why it couldn't look that good.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, very few games can capture the cinematic feel of those cutscenes
Mm-hmm.
because of the way that like the camera just can't work the way that it does in game, that it does in the trailer. But like games like God of War kind of somehow figured it out with that over the shoulder camera, and everything looks very cinematic.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure that
But that was
uh,
in their design philosophy.
right, and I'm pretty sure that one of the people who made the game said that there were no out of engine cutscenes, like it was all in engine. So
Mm-hmm.
like it's doable. You just have to do it right. A lot of that's going to
Yeah.
come down to lighting, shadows, that kind of stuff.
Right. And just yeah. Oh, another thing. I am pretty sure that it slipped during this presentation that this is an exclusively next generation title.
They hinted
Did you
at
get
it.
that sense?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
you see how long it's been, in development. I'm pretty sure that they knew when they started making the game that this console generation was over. I mean, I think this console generation is almost 6 years old already. Came
It's
out in
actually,
2014.
yeah, which is pretty long for a console generation.
Yeah, like that's about as long as the PS3 console generation. And like you could see what they managed to be able to do with like The Last of Us with the PS3 hardware. And so I'm sure they could do crazy cool things with, the PS4 hardware, now that it's all figured out, but they're shooting for next gen. I mean, we've just got a new
Yeah,
generation of graphics cards. We got the NVIDIA Super Series. We have the AMD Navi architecture. Like it's here. It's next gen hardware. Anyone who buys a graphics card right now is basically going to be future proof for a couple of years.
yeah.
So it would be a no brainer to put it out because they can do more. Um, yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's just right on the cusp of a new generation. So it could be a launch title, actually. And
Yeah.
Ubisoft loves to create launch titles for new systems. It's their wheelhouse.
Yeah. I mean, for better or
Mhm.
for worse, but
Well, that's true.
they've got till
But
holiday 2020 before the consoles
yeah,
drop. So likely they'll need to finish making the game and have it ready to push towards publishing by, September at the latest.
yeah.
Because I know that
So,
publishing process takes about 3 months. Can't make any changes
right.
after that to the disc. Um,
But
so
yeah, we can do updates for days.
yeah,
So
of
I don't
course.
know.
Why
Yeah,
push out a
yeah.
finished game?
uh,
Yeah,
so with that, we're looking forward to the live stream that is
yeah,
coming up on October 31st, live from Paris, which
hmm
will be so cool. And that I think will be the sixth live stream.
hmm
And hopefully we'll find out some new information about the game. And hopefully you have enjoyed this video. And just so happy to be here with you, Eli, talking about Beyond Good and Evil 2.
yeah, man. I'm looking forward to creating more content with you, getting my feet wet, doing maybe some review discussions.
Yes. So we've
Diving
got
into
some
other
things
titles.
in the works.
Yeah,
So
keep your
yeah,
eyes peeled.
more on that to
Might be
come.
something with Outer Worlds.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so.
Well, thank you so
Great.
much for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Leave a comment down below what you thought about the video. Get the discussion rolling.